In the summer of 1890, I boarded the number 3 train in my hometown of Bridgeport, West Virginia, looking for a new start. I thought that start was in Parkersburg. When the train rolled into the depot at Wilsonburg, a man many years my elder got on. All the seats were taken, so I stood up and offered him my seat. Less than an hour later, that man offered me a job in the oil business. "What is the future in it?" I asked. "If you think there is one, I'll get off." That man, John Worthington, of the South Penn Oil Company, smiled at me and said, "Yes, there's a future." So I got off with him in West Union. From there, I made my future first in West Virginia, then across the states, in the Canadian tundra, in Mexico, across parts of Europe, up the Amazon. My partner, Joe Trees, and I have unlocked more oil than anyone else in the world. I've made millions and drilled my share of dry holes. In the end, though, I made more money than I lost. I lost a son, too. But I'm getting ahead of the story.
They called him the Great Wildcatter. He prowled the globe, tracking oil in unexpected and unexplored areas. By the age of 26, Mike Benedum was one of the wealthiest oil producers in the country. Over the ensuing decades, he became one of the richest men in America and a generous philanthropist.
He is one of the nation's dozen wealthiest men and one of the largest, if not the largest, taxpayer in America, and by all odds, the most successful wildcatter in history. He has never bought a ticket on a racehorse, tossed a chip on a roulette table, owned a share of stock on margin, or even bet a nickel on a game of penny ante, and he regularly denounces gambling to his associates. Yet he is the greatest gambler in America. Ken Magazine, June 8, 1939.
The oil industry knows him as its #1 pioneer. But those of us who daily sit across the desk from him know him better as the #1 Christian gentleman. His generous philanthropy, which he bestows with tolerance that knows no race, color, or creed, but which is measured only in terms of human need. It has been said that all great men are not good, but that all good men are great. Mr. Benedum is both a great man and a good man. Walter Hallinan, President of Plymouth Oil Company, Chairman of the National Petroleum Council.
Mike Benedum would be a great man if he didn't have a dollar to his name. He would be a great man if he had never drilled an oil or gas well. He would be a great man if he had not been honored by his own country and many foreign nations. It has not been money, power, or honor that has made a giant out of this native of West Virginia, of whom we are all so proud. The thing that made him a titanic figure is the nobility of his character. Bernie Curry, to the West Virginia Oil and Gas Association, 1956.
Michael L. Benedum was born on July 16, 1869, in Bridgeport, West Virginia. The fourth of 5 children born to Squire Emmanuel Benedum and his second wife, Caroline. Mike also had an older half-brother. The squire was a cabinet maker, and the family shared a wing of this plain wooden structure that also housed a general store and a workshop. A few miles out of town, they farmed. Once well-to-do, the family fell on hard times. So At 16, Mike quit school to help support the family. He found a job at a flour mill in Lumberport, starting at $16 a month, and worked his way up to manager.
In all that period, I never saw a show, a ball game, or any other kind of entertainment. Nor did I spend either then or ever afterward a penny for tobacco or alcohol.
He gave half of every paycheck to his mother and still managed to put back $500 in an account at the Lowndes Savings Bank in Clarksburg. A few years in, after working around the clock for several days in a row, Mike's sleeve got caught in the machinery. His screams woke his helper, who turned off the machinery in time to save Mike's life. It took an hour to free him. That's when Mike, now 21, decided to buy that train ticket to a new opportunity. And so began a career that spanned 7 decades. John Worthington, the man who gave Mike his start, was general superintendent of the South Penn Oil Company, owned by John D. Rockefeller. One of Mike's favorite anecdotes describes how Worthington gave him a letter to deliver to Newt Wilkerson, head leaseman, here on the left. Mike rode horseback all day and night, looking in vain for Wilkerson. When he returned, Worthington said shrewdly, "The letter was unsealed. You must have seen it was unimportant." Said Mike, "It was sealed to my eyes, sir." Benedum started as a leaseman. The company had run into resistance acquiring tracts in Tyler County, so they sent Benedum out with a list of names, some maps, and rental money, and the next morning he walked back into the office with a lease from everyone on the list. His background made him relatable to landowners, and he built a reputation for honesty and integrity that followed him throughout his career. 1896 was a momentous year for Benedum. He left South Penn to strike out as an independent producer with his brother, Charles. And it was the year Mike met a young Pittsburgh engineer by the name of Joe Trees.
Before I met Mike, I'd bought an interest in 13 different wells, and every one was a dry hole. I clearly remember the first deal Mike and I made. A new well was brought in a place called Whiskey Run back of St. Mary's in Pleasants County. All the land was leased, so I shopped around to see if I could buy a piece of the oil royalty.
Trees didn't have the funds to make that deal, so Mike put up the cash. 1896 was also the year that Mike married Sarah Lance. A year later, their only child was born. They named him Claude, and gave him the middle name of Worthington to honor the man who had given Benedum his start. On September 17, 1900, the Benedum Trees Oil Company was formed. And for decades afterwards, not a day would go by that Mike and Joe weren't drilling somewhere in the world. With success came growth, and in 1913, the company purchased a building in the heart of Pittsburgh for their corporate headquarters. Mike Benedum and Joe Trees remained business partners for nearly half a century, until 1943, when Trees died suddenly of a heart attack during a meeting with his partner. Both men had acquired massive fortunes and became multimillionaires as they made discoveries worldwide. They struck oil in places no one thought was possible: Illinois, Louisiana, Mexico, and deep into the impenetrable Amazon jungle. They opened the Permian Basin in Texas, prospected in Romania, Turkey, Canada, China, the Philippines, and more. A fair number of their ventures came up dry, but Mike said it was all about the averages, and he took issue with those who called him a gambler.
There is a vast difference between the chances that I take on wildcat wells and those which I warn you against. If you win in the stock market or at the gaming table, somebody else loses. But if I win, nobody loses. On the other hand, everyone gains because new wealth is discovered and made available for all.
Benedum gave others a chance too. Dozens of his employees became millionaires as he would lend them money to buy stock in one of their ventures. He also provided a retirement fund at a time when many companies did not. Both Benedum and Trees donated generously to philanthropic causes. In his hometown, Benedum built the Bridgeport Civic Center, designed as a likeness to his home place. He built the Bridgeport Methodist Church. He built a pool and a cemetery, and so much more that in 1944, when he was 74 years old, the city honored him by putting his name on the airport. At the dedication, he had this to say:
It has been my good fortune to have traveled the world a great deal and have been received and entertained by presidents of the United States and by rulers of foreign nations. But none of those honors meant one half of so much to me as this expression of the respect and goodwill of the people of Harrison County. I have seen the Amazon, the Mississippi, the Rhine, and the Ganges. I have crossed 2 great oceans. I have seen the Alps and the Himalayas. And while the streams and hills of West Virginia have by comparison diminished somewhat in size, they have lost none of their majesty, none of their charm, and none of their sacredness to me. By the same token, the men and women of the hills of West Virginia are still the real princes and potentates of the earth to me.
He loved West Virginia, but the love of his life was Sarah, who he referred to as Mama. A bright and independent woman, she was a true partner in his success. He took lunch daily at Pittsburgh's famed Duquesne Club, but spent his evenings with her at their impressive home called Greystone. A lifelong Democrat who is credited with putting Roosevelt in the Oval Office, Benedum had an opportunity to take a cabinet seat or high diplomatic post. He told them, quote, "There are only 2 jobs on earth that I want. One is the job of finding more oil, and the other is taking care of Mama." Their devotion to one another was exceeded only by their devotion to their blue-eyed boy. At the beginning of World War I, at the age of 20, Claude enlisted. He wanted to be a pilot, as entranced by flight as his father was.
He was likable, well-trained, always interesting, and always their hope for the future. The vision guiding Mr. Benedum was laying the foundation for Claude's future. Claude was to have Greystone for his home, and Claude would follow him in the Benedum Trees organization and the community. But it was not God's will. Margaret Davis, Secretary to Mr. Benedum.
Claude registered for military service in mid-September 1918. He qualified to be a pilot, but poor vision kept him grounded. Little more than a month after he enlisted, Claude died in the 1918 Spanish flu epidemic. He was 21. In 1944, the Benedums started the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation to honor their son. Its first 3 trustees were Mike and Sarah Benedum and their nephew, Paul Benedum Sr. Sarah was actively involved. She directed some of the funds to causes and organizations that served women and children. Active in their faith, the Benedums gave generously to their denomination, their church, and related causes. One of the earliest grants was to the United Negro College Fund. Benedum was deeply concerned about racial prejudice and strongly believed that all people should have access to education. He also gave to the Red Cross and led efforts to sell war bonds. After Sarah's death in 1951, Benedum appointed his secretary, Margaret Davis, as a trustee. And for several decades, Mike, Paul, and Margaret directed all the funds. Benedum never retired. When he died on July 30th, 1959, just a few weeks into his 90th year, his estate was estimated at more than $100 million. Half of it went to family members, and the other half to the foundation. Today, the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation still operates out of the Benedum Trees building in downtown Pittsburgh. Before he passed away, Mike appointed his nephew, Paul, as chairman of the board, and he penned a codicil to his will that serves as the foundation's guiding star.
Mr. Benedum left a fifth codicil to his will that really laid out for us his philosophy about how he wanted his money spent after he died. And that codicil's our pole star. It's on the wall in our conference room in beautiful writing, and it's something we read regularly. It's incredibly beautiful language. But more importantly, it expresses the heart and soul of the Benedum family. They were generous people, they were caring people. They believed that everyone deserved a chance in life, that people deserved a hand up and not a handout. And that's the way we've tried to run the foundation.
True to his roots, Benedum focused the foundation's charitable efforts on his home state of West Virginia and his adopted home of Pittsburgh. Grants were directed to meet health, education, and community needs. From 1944 to 1977, an impressive 48,000 college students were given scholarships and financial aid. The foundation also went through a period from 1945 through the 80s when its donations were directed to capital projects. Led at this point by a 7-member board, funding was provided to many academic institutions to build libraries, campus centers, science buildings, and more, including community parks and fine arts centers. One of its hallmark projects was the renovation of Pittsburgh's Stanley Theater into the Benedum Center for Performing Arts. In all, nearly 1,000 projects were built. As the foundation matured and the endowment grew, Paul Jenkins, a Pittsburgh attorney, was hired as the foundation's first president. A professional staff was also brought on board, with program officers who became partners to those receiving grants. More recently, the foundation has focused on programs being led by local leaders and nonprofit organizations. Capacity building and partnerships became an emphasis.
The Benedum Foundation is always seeking growth, like within themselves, like to really understand what's happening. And I find that also kind of wonderful. They're interested in finding these new connections. They're really interested in finding new ways of doing things. And I think it adds a different level of professionalism and a different kind of response to situations. Always seeking new grantees, always seeking new ways of doing things. It's just, it's an interesting time because there's so much need. And Benedum is looking for new solutions to all those needs.
From its humble start as a family foundation, with an initial endowment of $50,000, the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation has grown into an entity with nearly a $450 million endowment. In today's dollars, the foundation has provided grants totaling more than $1.37 billion to education, economic and community development, and health and cultural programs. The impact of its philanthropy in West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania is immeasurable.
What is our vision going forward? We want to continue to understand, discern, and carry on Michael's legacy and his vision and his will. We are trustees. We are trying to execute his will. So what we focus on in all that we do is, what does the world look like 80 years from now? What do the next 80 years hold? We bring that back, and more critically, we probably say, what do the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years look like? What does his charge to us look like in this day and time? Michael Benedum lived in a time of change, and he was a change agent. He was not afraid of change. He was not afraid of risk. He was not afraid of experimentation and trying things new. I think it's very easy, especially in connection with a foundation, to always be looking back and never looking forward. Michael would have us look forward at all times. And so even as we try to anchor in understanding who he and Sarah were, we're always trying to listen to his admonition to don't look back, look forward.
In 1948, Time magazine wrote, Michael Benedum started in the oil business at the age of 20 with $500 in cash and $1 million worth of nerve. His life and legacy continues to inspire.
Life has been sweet to me. Sweet in the loved ones that have been mine. Sweet in the friends who have surrounded me. And rewarding in the opportunities that have come my way. I could not leave this earth with any degree of happiness and satisfaction if I felt I had not tried to bring some of these joys to those less fortunate than I have been. We know not where seed may sprout. In the poorest and most unregarded child, who seems to be abandoned to ignorance and evil, there may slumber virtue, intellect, and genius. It is our duty to sow and to nurture, leaving it to others to harvest the fruits of our efforts.